So, hello friends. It is like an introductory session which I am covering. This is cardiovascular system. So today we'll study the basic concepts of cardiovascular system and I will try to explain in a more simplified way. Thanks a lot. So hello friends. Let's see the structure of heart. So this is left ventricle as you are seeing. This is right ventricle. There are two parts. Now, this left ventricle has a thick muscular wall, and the right ventricle has a thin muscular wall. Why left ventricle has a thick muscular wall? Because it pumps the blood to all the body in systemic circulation, to the toes, to your ears, every part of the body it pumps. So for this reason there is high pumping pressure, so the thickness automatically it needs uh, more power to sustain that pressure. So this is the reason it has thick muscular wall. In comparison, right ventricle it is only pumping blood to the lungs, so it does not have that much pumping pressure. Automatically thin muscular wall. Now second part we come. There are two valves in the left ventricle. The valve which is having direction upwards, it is leaving the left ventricle into the systemic circulation, is known as aorta, this pathway, and this valve is known as aortic valve. There is another valve beside aortic valve which is opening downside. This is opening downside, so it is a cusp like structure. It is a cusp. So in this case, you know that there are two cusps which open downside. So this is known as bicuspid valve or mitral valve. So there are, in this valve is the opening of, there is another chamber upside. This chamber is known as atrium. Atrium, this is left atrium. It's obvious. The part here, it is left atrium. And there are passage for veins, pulmonary veins. So these large veins, as you see, these are draining blood into the upper chamber. Upper chamber, that is the left atrium. So you have seen that in left atrium there are two valves, valve pointing down the way, valve pointing up the way. And this valve, which is in between left atrium and left ventricle, is atrioventricular valve. So we have understood the concept that this atrioventricular valve, it opens into left ventricle by means of two cusps we have studied earlier. It is known as bicuspid valve or mitral valve. So the valve between the left ventricle and aorta is aortic valve. Aortic valve or aortic valve, whatever you pronounce. It is the valve between left ventricle and aorta. So sometimes it is also referred to as semi-lunar valve because it looks like half a moon. So what we have seen, that aorta is the largest vessel that carries the blood from the left ventricle into the systemic circulation, and here are pulmonary veins that are taking the blood into the left atrium. So we have seen this. You see, the terminology is very simple. An artery is a vessel that is carrying blood away from the heart, and a vein is any vessel that is carrying blood towards the heart. So, vein is any vessel that is carrying blood towards the heart, and pulmonary, you know that it is related to the lungs. So, now let's come to the right ventricle. So, there is also a valve which is opening upside or towards upside. It is known as pulmonary artery. We know this terminology, pulmonary artery. Arteries is any vessel that is carrying blood from the heart, and we know the from the heart to the body parts, but here it is pulmonary. So you can understand it is very clear that blood is being carried away from the right ventricle by means of pulmonary artery to the lungs. It is as simple. And this valve which is pointing up the way, this is known as pulmonary valve. So in the case of left atrium and left ventricle, you have seen there is a valve which is having two cusps. But here in the case of right ventricle, there is a valve which is opening downside in between the right atrium and right ventricle. It is known as tricuspid valve because it has three cusps here. So now we can see the ultimate part. This is the right atrium. The portion, the chamber above the right ventricle is right atrium. It has the two largest vessels, which are known as vena cava. So vena cava from upper body, and this is vena cava from lower body. We will see. So why it is also known as superior vena cava and inferior vena cava because this is in charge of draining blood from upper part of the body, and inferior vena cava is the in charge of draining blood from lower part of the body. Both are draining blood into the right atrium. So let's see the blood flow. The purified blood, the oxygenated blood, which is coming from the lungs, will enter by means of pulmonary veins into the left atrium. From here, the blood will go into the left ventricle by means of mitral valve or bicuspid valve, as it is a valve between left atrium and left ventricle, so the purified blood will go to the left ventricle. So when the blood comes here in the left ventricle, whenever heart contracts, so blood will flow to the this part, aortic semilunar valve, and it crosses moving into the aorta, and aorta will pump blood or will carry out blood into small vessels and then to our systemic circulation moving to different parts of our body. So in this passage, it gives some of its oxygen to the tissues, to the organs, not all the oxygen. So when blood comes back from the body, so it will come from via superior vena cava if it is from the upper parts of the body, and if it has the lower part of the body, it is come via inferior vena cava. So you see, Both the vena cavas are carrying partially deoxygenated blood. Sorry, it is deoxygenated blood, and it goes into the right atrium. Then, by means of tricuspid valve, because it is the valve between right atrium and right ventricle. So, through this tricuspid valve, the deoxygenated blood it goes into the right ventricle and then moves by means of. So, you see, when the right ventricle contracts, the blood will go through the pulmonary semilunar valve, arterial semilunar valve, and goes to the lungs.